We all want safety, we all want comfort, we all want to feel secure in our choices, our jobs, our relationships, our future. That's natural. But let me tell you something that most people never want to admit: playing it safe is not safe at all. In fact, always playing safe is one of the riskiest decisions you can make in life. Because the truth is, behind the illusion of security, there is a hidden cost. And that cost is your growth, your potential, your passion, and in many ways, your entire life. Think about it. Every single breakthrough in human history, every invention, every leap of progress, every great story you admire, none of it came from someone who chose the safe option. It came from someone willing to risk, to fail, to step into uncertainty, to embrace discomfort. And yet most people live their entire lives clinging desperately to comfort zones, to routines, to things that feel predictable and secure. They convince themselves it's the smart choice, that it's the responsible choice. But years later, they wake up with a haunting feeling deep inside. What if I had tried? What if I had risked? What if I had stopped playing it so damn safe? That's the hidden cost. And today, we're going to talk about it. Safety is something we all crave. From the moment we are kids, we are taught to be careful, to stay within the lines, to avoid danger. As adults, that lesson evolves into seeking out stable jobs, predictable routines, and secure relationships. It feels good to know what tomorrow will look like. It feels good to believe we're in control, that the ground beneath us won't suddenly give way. But here's the uncomfortable truth: that feeling of safety is just an illusion. Life is unpredictable. Nothing is guaranteed. The job you think is stable can vanish overnight because of a company restructuring, an economic crash, or a new technology. The relationship you assume will last forever can collapse under the weight of change. Even your health, something you rely on every single day without thought, can be taken from you in a single moment. We like to convince ourselves that playing safe shields us from chaos, but it doesn't. All it really does is delay the inevitable realization that life is not under our control. When people cling to safety, they believe they are avoiding risk, but in reality, they are simply choosing a different kind of risk: the risk of stagnation, the risk of missed opportunities, the risk of regret. The world is constantly shifting, evolving, reinventing itself, and those who bury themselves in the comfort of what feels secure are often the ones who get left behind. Safety may feel like control, but it is actually surrender. It is the surrender of growth, the surrender of curiosity, the surrender of the possibility of becoming more than you currently are. The cruel irony is that people work so hard to build these little fortresses of safety around themselves. Steady careers, predictable routines, comfortable habits, only to realize years later that the walls they built to protect themselves were actually the walls of a prison. Think about history for a second. None of the progress humanity has made, no discoveries, no inventions, no revolutions, came from people who chose the safe option. Electricity, airplanes, space exploration, even the device you're using right now, all of it came from risk takers. These were people who looked at the unknown and decided to step into it, even though they could have failed miserably, even though they were often ridiculed or doubted. Playing safe never built anything meaningful. Playing safe preserves the status quo, and the status quo eventually crumbles on its own. So the illusion of safety is actually the path of decay. People don't realize how fragile safe really is until it shatters. The stable job disappears, the relationship ends, the health declines, the savings vanish. Suddenly, the very thing they sacrifice passion and growth for is gone, and they are left with nothing to fall back on. No resilience, no adaptability, no courage. That is why safety is so dangerous. It tricks you into believing you can avoid pain, avoid failure, avoid change. But the truth is, pain and failure and change are unavoidable. The only difference is whether you face them willingly and grow stronger, or whether you run from them and stay fragile. The illusion of safety is seductive because it gives us a sense of control. But control is a lie. The only real control you have is over your choices, your actions, your willingness to embrace the unknown. Clinging to safety is like holding on to smoke. It feels like you've grabbed something solid, but when life squeezes harder, it slips right through your fingers. Comfort is addictive. It's warm, it's predictable, it feels safe. We naturally gravitate toward it because it doesn't challenge us, it doesn't scare us, it doesn't demand more than what we're already giving. But comfort has a hidden price tag. Every time you choose comfort over challenge, you sacrifice growth. Growth doesn't happen when things are easy. Growth happens when you're stretched, when you're uncertain, when you're struggling. It happens when you're outside the bubble of what feels familiar. That's why comfort and growth cannot coexist. You can't build strength while sitting still. You can't develop courage by avoiding what scares you. You can't learn resilience if you never have to recover from setbacks. Most people dream about changing their lives, but very few are willing to pay the cost of that change, and the cost is discomfort. Think about the gym. Muscles only grow when they are broken down through resistance. If you just lift weights that feel light and easy, your body stays the same. But when you push through heavier sets, when your arms shake and you feel like quitting, that's when your body adapts and becomes stronger. Life works the same way. If you only take on challenges that feel comfortable, you'll stay exactly where you are. The moment you lean into the discomfort of risk, of fear, of effort, that's when transformation begins. The tragedy is that people convince themselves they're making smart choices when they're really making safe ones. They say they want stability, but stability often means they're stuck in the same patterns, repeating the same days, going through the same motions year after year. They call it security, but really it's stagnation. A life that doesn't grow, that doesn't evolve, becomes smaller and smaller over time. The comfort zone shrinks until it becomes a cage, and the longer you stay inside it, the harder it becomes to break out. That's why people wake up years later realizing they wasted their potential, because comfort deceived them into thinking they were living wisely when they were actually avoiding life. It's important to realize that discomfort isn't punishment, it's feedback. It's the signal that you are stepping into something new. Every major achievement, every breakthrough, every meaningful pursuit comes with discomfort attached to it. The fear you feel when you start a new career, the nervousness when you speak in front of a crowd, the uncertainty when you move to a new city, these are all signs that you're growing. Instead of avoiding that discomfort, you should embrace it, because it's proof that you're expanding who you are. If comfort is your guide, you'll stay small. If growth is your guide, you'll have to get uncomfortable. The truth is that people often confuse being comfortable with being happy. Comfort feels good in the short term, but in the long term, it erodes your sense of fulfillment. Fulfillment comes from progress, from the knowledge that you are becoming stronger, wiser, braver than you were before. Progress requires challenge, and challenge requires you to step away from what's easy. The very things that scare you, that intimidate you, that make you doubt yourself, those are the gateways to the life you actually want. Comfort whispers, stay here, it's fine. Growth whispers, come here, it will be worth it. And the choice you make between those two voices will define the quality of your life. Failure terrifies most people, and because of that fear, they cling to safety as if it will protect them from pain. But the truth is that failure is not the enemy, regret is. Failure stings, but regret haunts. When you try and fall short, yes, it hurts, but the wound heals. You learn something, you adapt, and you become stronger for it. When you don't try at all, the wound doesn't bleed on the outside, it bleeds on the inside. It stays with you, quietly gnawing at you year after year, whispering what could have been. That whisper grows louder with time, and eventually it becomes unbearable. That is why regret is heavier than failure. People often underestimate the power of regret. They think it's harmless to put off their dreams for another year, to silence their true desires, to stick with what feels familiar instead of chasing what excites them. But time moves fast, and suddenly a year becomes a decade. The chances they once had slip away, and when they look back, they don't remember the failures nearly as much as they remember the risks they never took. A failed business can be rebuilt. A failed relationship can be healed or replaced. But the opportunity that was never seized doesn't come back. That's what makes regret so brutal. It locks you into a past that can't be rewritten. Failure, on the other hand, is never final unless you stop trying. Every failure carries lessons, and those lessons shape your future. The greatest entrepreneurs, artists, and leaders are not the ones who avoided failure, but the ones who collected the most failures and kept going anyway. They understood that failure is a price of admission for success. Nobody gets to the top without stumbling along the way. Every mistake builds resilience, and every setback teaches something you couldn't have learned otherwise. That is why failure, painful as it is, always gives you something in return. Regret gives you nothing but emptiness. When people play it safe, they believe they are avoiding pain. They believe that by not trying, they are protecting themselves from the humiliation or disappointment of failing. But the reality is that they are just choosing a different pain, one that is far worse. Failure lasts a season. Regret lasts a lifetime. That's why you hear people in their old age talk about the things they wish they had done, the words they wish they had spoken, the dreams they wish they had chased. They don't talk much about the failures. They laugh at those, they see them as part of the journey. But the things they never attempted, those remain like scars on their hearts. Regret is heavy because it cannot be changed. You can't go back in time to chase the dream you abandoned or to take the leap you avoided. That's why living with regret is like carrying an invisible weight that never goes away. Failure, on the other hand, can be changed. You can try again, pivot, reinvent yourself, and rise stronger than before. One is a dead end, the other is a stepping stone. The danger of always playing it safe is that you might avoid failing, but in the process, you guarantee regret. And when you compare the two, failure will always be the lighter burden to carry. Fear has a clever way of disguising itself. Most people don't like to admit they're scared, so instead of saying, I'm afraid, they create logical, sounding excuses that make their decisions appear rational. They tell themselves it's not the right time to take the leap, that they should wait until they have more money saved, that they'll start once things feel more stable. On the surface, these reasons seem intelligent and responsible, but underneath them lies a simple truth. They are scared. Fear rarely announces itself openly. Instead, It hides behind phrases like being realistic or thinking things through. It pretends to be wisdom when in reality, it's avoidance. This disguise is what keeps so many people trapped in the same patterns for years. They believe they are acting logically, that they are weighing the pros and cons, but what they're really doing is letting fear run their lives in the background. Logic becomes a shield that protects them from risk, but also from opportunity. Fear convinces them that staying still is the smart move, that waiting longer is safer, but all it really does is waste time. And time once gone never comes back. The irony is that no amount of logic will ever eliminate the risks of life. There will never be a perfect time to start the business, to leave the unfulfilling job, to pursue the passion that burns inside. There will never be a guarantee that things will work out exactly as planned. The conditions will never be flawless. If someone waits for all the stars to align before they act, they will wait forever. Fear, dressed up as logic, will always find another reason to postpone action, another justification to delay. This endless waiting creates the illusion of careful planning, but in reality, it's paralysis. What makes this even more dangerous is that society often praises these excuses. People will nod and agree when someone says, "I'm just being practical," or "I'll do it when I'm more financially stable." It sounds mature. It sounds responsible. But maturity is not about endlessly postponing your life. Responsibility is not about refusing to take chances. True responsibility is recognizing that fear is manipulating your decisions and having the courage to act in spite of it. When fear masquerades as logic, it robs you of experiences that could have changed your life. It keeps you from applying for the job you want because you convince yourself you're not qualified enough. It keeps you from moving to the city you dream about because you rationalize that it's too expensive or too risky. It keeps you from confessing your feelings because you tell yourself the timing isn't right. All of these stories feel convincing in the moment, but later, when you look back, you see them for what they really were: excuses born out of fear. The most successful and fulfilled people are not those who never felt fear, but those who stopped believing its lies. They recognized the voice of fear even when it was dressed up as logic and chose not to obey it. They acted without waiting for certainty. They understood that clarity doesn't come before action, it comes after. The moment you step forward, the moment you take the leap, life begins to reveal itself. Until then, you are just circling in the same spot, convincing yourself you're being smart when really you're being ruled by fear. Think about the moments in your life when you felt most alive. Chances are, they weren't the moments where everything was predictable, easy, and safe. They were the moments when you risked something, when you stepped into uncertainty, when you didn't know how things would turn out, but you did it anyway. Meaning doesn't come from comfort, it comes from risk. The act of putting yourself out there, of investing your energy, your emotions, and your effort into something uncertain is what gives life depth and richness. Without risk, everything becomes flat, repetitive, and dull. When you confess your feelings to someone not knowing if they'll feel the same, that's risk. When you put your art, your business, or your ideas out into the world, that's risk. When you pack your bags and move to a place you've never been, leaving behind everything familiar, that's risk. These moments carry uncertainty, and because of that, they also carry meaning. It is precisely because you could lose, because you could fail, because it could hurt, that it feels so alive and so important. If everything were guaranteed, if every outcome was predictable, nothing would matter. Without risk, there is no value. Life's most powerful emotions are all tied to risk. Love without the risk of heartbreak is just comfort, not love. Success without the possibility of failure is just routine, not achievement. Courage without fear isn't courage at all, it's just habit. The beauty of risk is that it sharpens the experience of being alive. It forces you to care, to invest, to give your all. Safety dulls the senses. Risk awakens them. The problem is that many people live as though avoiding risk will protect them. They settle into routines, they choose paths that feel predictable, they make decisions designed to minimize uncertainty. But by doing that, they also minimize meaning. They end up living lives that are technically safe but emotionally empty. Their days may look fine on the outside, but inside they feel a quiet dissatisfaction, a subtle emptiness that grows over time. That emptiness is the cost of refusing to risk. Every meaningful story you admire, every person you look up to, got there because they embraced risk. They pursued dreams others thought were impossible. They faced rejection, failure, and pain. They put themselves in situations where the outcome wasn't certain, but they chose to try anyway. That's what made their lives worth remembering. Risk is the ingredient that transforms existence from survival into a story. Without it, your life is just a string of safe decisions that lead nowhere. The truth is, you don't remember the nights you got a perfect 8 hours of sleep, or the days you played it safe and stuck to the routine. You remember the nights you laughed until your stomach hurt, the trips where you got lost in a new place, the times you stood up for yourself when it wasn't easy. Those memories matter because they were risks, and in taking them, you found meaning. Risk makes you vulnerable, yes, but vulnerability is where connection, growth, and fulfillment live. Meaning is not found in avoiding risk, but in embracing it. The fear you feel before doing something uncertain is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're alive, that what you're about to do matters. The risks you're avoiding right now, the words you haven't said, the dreams you haven't pursued, the leaps you haven't taken, those are the very things that could give your life the depth you're searching for. Without them, you may feel safe, but safety alone cannot make you feel alive. Life doesn't give you the option to avoid risk altogether. Every path you choose, whether bold or cautious, carries a form of risk. The mistake people make is believing that by playing it safe, they've eliminated risk when in reality, they've only chosen a different kind of risk. One that's often far more damaging in the long run. You can take the risk of trying and failing, or you can take the risk of never trying and being left with regret. You can face the risk of rejection when you open your heart, or you can face the risk of loneliness if you never let anyone in. You can accept the risk of starting over, or you can accept the risk of staying stuck where you don't belong. No matter what, you are always gambling something. This truth is uncomfortable because it takes away the illusion of control. People want to believe there's a path where nothing can go wrong, where every decision is protected and certain. But life doesn't work that way. Even the so-called safe path is littered with risks. Risks of missed opportunities, wasted years, unfulfilled potential, and deep regret. You might avoid the sting of failure by not trying, but you invite the dull ache of wondering what could have been. You might avoid embarrassment by staying quiet, but you invite the pain of never being truly seen. You might avoid uncertainty by staying in a job you dislike, but you invite the crushing weight of knowing you sacrificed passion for predictability. Once you realize this, the question isn't whether you should take risks. The real question becomes, which risk are you willing to live with? Is it better to risk short-term discomfort or long-term dissatisfaction? Is it better to risk the pain of failure or the pain of regret? One burns fast and sharp, the other lingers like a shadow that never leaves. The irony is that failure, as painful as it is, usually becomes a source of pride later. People look back on their failures as moments when they were brave enough to try. Regret, on the other hand, only deepens with time. Nobody looks back fondly on the chances they didn't take. The risk of action at least opens the door to growth, to discovery, to possibility. If you try and fail, you learn something. You build resilience, you gain experience, you uncover paths you didn't even know existed. You might fall, but you get up stronger, wiser, more prepared. The risk of inaction gives you nothing. It doesn't protect you. It doesn't teach you. It doesn't move you forward. It simply locks you in place while the world moves on without you. And in that stillness, you lose more than you realize. You lose time, energy, dreams, and eventually, the belief that you're capable of more. The truth is, growth always requires risk, but so does stagnation. Every day you're making a trade. You're trading the risk of today's discomfort for the risk of tomorrow's regret. You're trading the risk of failing in public for the risk of disappearing in silence. You're trading the risk of starting over for the risk of never beginning. Once you see that no path is risk-free, the choice becomes clear. It is better to risk something that might build you than to risk everything by staying the same.